Well, hello there. This is Virtual the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. Really pleased today to have Miss Kyla Zhao, who's recently published her new novel uh, on uh, on on chess. May the best player win. Written for young readers. Hello, Kyla. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you very much. Look, I think it's absolutely fantastic that you've sort of written. I think this is your third novel. Is that correct?
Yes, my
Yep.
third one, but this is my first one for a younger
Yeah,
audience.
first one for young audience, and I think the first one with a focus on chess. And
Yeah.
we'll talk about it in a little bit more depth in a bit. But I've sort of seen that it's been referred to as kind of like the Queen's Gambit for younger readers.
Uh-huh.
But would you be able to first give a little bit of an introduction about yourself?
Yes, so I'm Kyla. I was born and grew up in Singapore. And then after high school, I moved to California to attend Stanford University. Graduated in 2021 with degrees in communication and strategy. Now I work at a tech company in Silicon Valley, and I also write books on the side.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Well, May the Best Player Win has been released for a couple of weeks now. How do you feel and what has the reception been for your book so far?
Yeah, the thing about writing for a younger audience is that it's actually such a different space from adult novels. Younger readers have less of a filter. So if they tell you that they like your book, you know that it is genuine, that they're not just saying it to be polite. So, every comment from younger readers, like it always means a lot. And it's also nice when parents and kids come up to me and say that, and especially when a parent says like, "Oh, I really enjoy your book, and I decided to also share it with my kid," or "My kid
Hmm.
and I were fighting over your book." So that's always a very heartwarming thing to hear.
Fantastic. Now, I think I saw on your social media that you recently had a sort of in-person book launch
Yeah.
where you live. I think you live on the western coast of the United States.
Yes, in
Yep,
California still.
yep. And how did that go?
It went really well. I told everyone to come in black and white.
Hmm.
Some people did. I almost didn't because I don't actually have that many clothes in black and white. I realized as I was trying to dress myself.
Hmm.
And this isn't my first book launch, so
Hmm.
in a way, I do feel more experienced. And it's just a great bookstore. I've been there quite a few times. So doing it in a comfortable environment, that always helps to settle the nerves a little bit. And ultimately, this is a book that I know a lot about, that is
Hmm.
very close to me. So I'm always happy for a chance to share it with people and to talk about it.
Fantastic, excellent. Now, I originally sort of read your book. You sent a copy to me in PDF as a sort of advanced reading, so quite enjoyed that because I had a little bit of travel that week. Now, one of the sort of earliest surprises for me in the book, I think it was in the first or second chapter, was actually discovering the existence of chocolate xiaolongbao. Um, we don't have those in Din Tai Fung in Australia, and I don't think we have
Oh,
those at all actually here.
okay.
So that was sort of an interesting sort of thing to me. I think we missed out on a bit of sort of innovative food in Australia. But can you tell me a little bit about the creative decision about including descriptions of a variety of food actually in the story? Because it sort of is an interesting way I thought was sort of fleshing out the I suppose the character of the protagonist a bit.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because actually the decision to write, those food scenes, it was a very personal, almost like a selfish decision.
Hmm.
I wrote the first draft of this in 2020 during the pandemic when everyone was in lockdown and all the
Hmm.
restaurants were closed and none of us could go outside. I was living alone at that time and I was surviving off like frozen pasta. And I remember
Hmm.
just thinking like, oh, I wish I could be out there now, at Din Tai Fung eating xiaolongbao with my
Hmm.
friends. And so I wrote all those food into my book. And as you
Hmm.
might have noticed, there are a lot of, family food scenes, a lot of
Hmm.
communal eating experiences. And I think a lot of it was also because of my sense of isolation from being alone during the pandemic and not being back home in Singapore with my family and
Hmm.
just missing all those times when I could eat a meal with them and how I took that for granted.
Mm, mm. Yeah, look, that's quite interesting. And One of the things that I quite enjoyed in the book was now the protagonist is a sort of Chinese American girl, and as a sort of as someone who's ethnic Chinese myself, it was actually quite nice reading a story about a character who is ostensibly ethnic, I suppose, from the Western view of, sort of English literature, yet without it being stereotyped in some sort of almost caricatured way, while also not being sort of swept under the carpet, as as sort of removed as part of their identity, and reading through some of your material, I noticed that you tend to write stories about people of colour. Can you tell me a little bit about sort of the process you do to sort of make that work?
Yeah, I think in a way it's almost that there is no process, that it's just a lot easier and more comfortable writing about a
Mm-hmm.
community that is so close to me that I can really identify with and relate to. Because I remember when I was younger, I would always just be watching shows or reading books where the main character would be a girl with blonde hair and blue eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the longest time, I thought that only people who look like that could be the main characters. And while I never wrote any books when I was younger, I would write short stories. And in them, it was always some white blonde girl who was the main character, which doesn't even make sense because I grew up in Singapore. There were no white people around me, at least where I lived. But it was just something that was so ingrained in my mind. And it took many years to kind of unpack that sort of internalized, very westernized ideal of beauty and of what it meant to
Mm-hmm.
be a main character in a way. And so I'm hoping that by writing these books, I can help, people from the Asian diaspora feel more seen, represented, and empowered to realize that they can also be the stars of stories like that, that there
Mm-hmm.
is a place for them in these stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was reflecting because you described quite a few different types of Chinese food in the book. When I was, did you ever watch Pokemon, the sort of the anime Pokemon when you were a kid?
No, I
Okay,
didn't. I mean, I definitely knew it existed. I
right.
just never
So
got into it.
by the time Pokemon was around, I was already in university, but I did watch it back then, and I remember sort of in the early seasons of Pokemon, so in the English dub, they'll have some food out and they'll describe it sort of in Americanism, so jelly donuts and stuff, and it's obviously
Yeah.
onigiri, on screen. So I think it's really good that uh, in sort of written language, like having a wide variety of ethnic foods is now a very commonplace thing
Hmm.
in many Western countries, that it's actually just represented, I think, the way it is.
Yeah.
So that's so thank you for that. Now, the other thing I was really impressed about in the book was how you managed to keep the chess concepts accessible to non-chess readers, especially given the novel is a non-visual medium, and chess, we think
Yes.
of it as a board and the pieces. Can you talk about how you did this and your thinking process during the writing of the book for the chess scenes?
Yeah, I'm so glad you pointed that out because that was definitely one of the biggest challenges to convey such a visual game, to convey the tenseness of it without, having any imagery or visual notations included in the book itself. I think ultimately, when I was writing those chess scenes, I just asked myself the big overarching question of
Mm-hmm.
I am describing a game, but what am I hoping to convey with the game? Am I trying to convey her performance anxiety? Am I trying to convey her fear of failure or like her desire, her determination? And from that, I think it became easier to write out the scene itself and think
Mm-hmm.
about how it all fits into a larger picture of what I'm trying to portray. And the reader, chess players will read the book and be able to understand the references and the
Mm-hmm.
Easter eggs. But I think people with no chess experience or knowledge, they will read a book. They might not, know the specific names of the openings or even
Mm-hmm.
what the openings mean, but they will be able to grasp her, maybe her fear in that moment or her
Mm-hmm.
sense of uncertainty of not being able to know what the best move is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was curious. So I don't have a a great range of comparison, I suppose. The only other chess book that really describes moves in a lot of detail is probably The Queen's Gambit by who wrote it? Tevis Water?
Water
Tevis, yeah.
Yeah.
And the book itself, in my view, probably goes into the moves because I think he did it very accurately. But I suspect the book probably did a little bit too much. It's probably, I think, disengages the more casual reader somewhat. Now, for your book, I have to admit, I did notice a couple of things where I think you might have chosen perhaps the more thematic elements, so perhaps a bit of creative license with the actual game as opposed to necessarily the technical parts of the game. But I was wondering, did you actually have mapped games that the characters were playing, or was it more freeform in the writing?
It was more freeform.
Right.
So, for instance, in the Queen's Gambit, I know that they were trying to base some of the games
Yes.
depicted in the show on real, very famous games. For me, it was really kind of more about, like you said, the thematic component of it.
Yes.
What part of the game would best serve the theme that I'm trying to convey?
Yeah. So I think in Walter Tevis's book, again, I think they were based on all real games, which is what, in a sense, actually makes parts of his dialogue a little bit tedious. I will say that there was one bit which I think you probably did for thematic reasons when our protagonist plays the game, I think earlier on against her antagonist in the club, and I think the antagonist plays a king's gambit, and you describe it as an aggressive sort of move, which is fantastic. But there's this other theme which we'll get to a little bit about sort of perhaps the tension between bishops and knights in the book. And I think you mentioned that the antagonist reaches for his knight, but he plays the king's gambit. And I suppose technically you don't move the knight in the first couple of moves. And in the final sort of very tense battle, I think was it chapter 18 or 19, which I really enjoyed reading because that was the game that she sort of plays again with her soon-to-be friend again, an antagonist.
Yeah.
And I think where you capture the mental tension of that game really well. And I think that the final move she finds, it's a Philidor's mate, isn't it? The smothered mate.
Yeah, well, she never got to play it out towards the end.
Right.
Well, I don't know if I'm allowed to do spoilers. Like, I presume it's okay. But yes, she does find it's actually meant to tie into a moment at the very start of the book when she says that she really admires Bobby Fischer for having played a really beautiful game of the century when he was only like 13. And she says that she could play a game like that. And, in that game, he made this very famous, I think, Queen Sacrifice. And so in a way, it was kind of meant to harken back to that.
Okay, wonderful, excellent. Now, one of the more serious themes of the book is the issue of sexism in chess and the impact that this has on young people, especially girls. Would you be able to speak on the topic? I believe that you yourself were a competitive level chess player as a school student.
Yeah. So, I think sexism can manifest itself in very explicit and also very implicit ways. And I think the explicit ones might be the ones that people are more familiar with. But in reality, it's usually not the case that someone's just going to walk up to you and be like, oh yeah, like girls suck at chess. It never really turns out like that. But I think it happens in more insidious moments, but it's also those really small moments that could stick with you and that could be very jarring for a child or for a younger person. Like when I was 11, for instance, and I was at this co-ed tournament, and then I was getting ready for my next round, and then me and everyone else was looking at the pairing sheet on the wall, and I knew who my next round opponent was. He didn't know me, so he didn't know that I was standing just like a few feet away. And I overheard him telling his friend, who's also a boy, like, oh, next round I'm playing against this person called Kyla Zhao. And his friend said, oh, you'll be fine, it's a girl. And just like a very small comment like that, I think kind of made me aware in the moment that female chess players were perceived in a certain way, and it's not an entirely positive way. And I think once that realization kind of creeps in, you just begin to notice more instances like that, not just from my peers or the people around me, but even from the world's top players, some of who are saying very unfavorable things about their female colleagues. And then that just made me wonder, like, oh, is chess really a space for me? Like, why am I training so hard if by default people think that I'm not going to be as good as the boy next to me? And then you begin to notice that, there are not that many female players, and then the number gets smaller and smaller as you move up the levels. And it kind of reinforces this idea that maybe this is not a very favorable space. Maybe I should just try something else.
Yeah, it's look, I think certainly it still appears to be a problem, and the internet is sometimes a bit of a cesspool in terms of bad behaviour for people as well. Do you see the field as improving for girls and women in chess?
I think there's more awareness about this issue, but honestly, I think we still have such a long way to go. And at first, I was very heartened that chess became popular during the pandemic because, for so long, people were like, oh, chess is a sport for nerds. But suddenly, during the pandemic, everyone was playing it. And I thought that was a really good sign. But what I actually heard was that might have even worsened the gender stereotypes or the gender imbalance in some ways. I was talking to someone from a certain national chess federation, whom I shall not name, and they were saying how, during the pandemic, the gender ratio in their country among chess players actually became more skewed towards men. And a very big hypothesis, which I agree with, was that when everyone starts learning chess online, and like you said, online is quite a cesspool. So if your first exposure to chess is in quite a toxic environment where people protected by the screen of anonymity feel it's okay to say such vile misogynist comments, you're just not going to feel welcome from the very beginning. And maybe if you have loved chess, if you have played it for many years, you might decide to stick it out. But for so many people who are just trying it out for the first time, it's like, well, why would I want to spend so much mental, emotional energy proving that I belong when I can pick up anything else? So I don't even know if, until I think the toxicity in online chess has been cleaned up, I still think that, so much more could be done. And actually, just right before this call, I was on the chess subreddit, and someone posted a screenshot of a comment that she received during an online game. And it was such a, like a sexist comment. And then the caption for the image was, and people wonder why there are so few female chess players. And it's like, yeah, this thing still exists. It is still so prevalent and so common.
Well, yeah, that's a sad thing to continue seeing, I suppose. Now, the other serious theme in the book is the impact of performance expectations. And in the book, our protagonist asks herself about 2/3 into the novel, but when was the last time I played chess for fun and not because I wanted to prove something for someone? Can you speak on this topic and how your perspectives on performance may have changed in time?
Yeah, so I think I was kind of raised with a mindset that something was only worth doing if you could get recognition for it, some sort of tangible reward like a trophy or medal, and that there's no point doing it if you're not going to be one of the best at it. So that was a mindset I had going into chess. And, at first I just really loved the game for what it was. I was just so excited by it. But like my character also discovered, which is that slowly the joy of the game began to be overshadowed by expectations, both from the people around her, but also from herself. And then that just kind of eats away at any happiness she gets from playing the game. And as a result, she starts dreading the game because, when you sit down at a board, if you win, it's almost expected. But if you lose, it's like catastrophic in a way. And I actually remember that when I was in middle school, maybe when I was 13 or 14, I lost a game that I really should not have lost. I basically just choked towards the end. And then after the game, my coach said, oh, like you lost because you didn't want it as badly as your opponent did. And I remember at that time being so offended. Like, how could you think that? I wanted it so badly. But in hindsight, I realized that my coach was right. I wanted to not lose, which isn't the same as wanting to win, even though they might sound similar. But I think there's a very nuanced difference between not wanting to lose and wanting to win. And when you think about not wanting to lose, it just affects the way you play. It affects the way you approach a game.
I noticed as one of the characters in your book is May's coach, who in the book I think is described as a former chess champion from his country of origin, and I found it actually very interesting because the protagonist in your book is a 12-year-old girl, so I suppose a child. Now I'm sort of I'm probably sort of middle-aged, old, and I'm old now, so I can barely remember what it's like to be 12. My son's actually currently 12. Reading the book makes me think I need to sort of understand his worldview a little bit better. But it was interesting to read, because the book is written from the first person and she's a child, how you were going to address some of these themes, which are somewhat more adult themes, I suppose, or at least themes which, in terms of their resolution, may be beyond necessarily the experience and understanding of the central character. And I felt that you potentially used the story of May's coach as I think, counterpoint of what it means to succeed. Why would someone undertake an activity, even to a very high level? I think May, at the beginning of the book, has perhaps more naive, very so bright-eyed ideas about that, and then we see a character growth, I think, over the course of the book towards perhaps a more nuanced understanding. Still a 12-year-old understanding, but a more nuanced understanding about performance and success. Did you have yourself someone like the coach in the novel who sort of influenced your ideas of what it meant to succeed, like a mentor, in terms of understanding what it means to succeed, what it means to do well, what it means to have a good life, for instance?
Yeah, I have really great coaches, but they never helped me in that regard. And I think actually the biggest reason is because I never opened up to anyone about how I was feeling. The performance anxiety, the sense of sitting down to a game and just being worried it's all going to go wrong. I never told a single person, because I thought that it would make me look weak, and I didn't want that. And actually, I thought that I couldn't handle the pressure of competition because I was a girl. I was like, because I would grow up and I would hear things like girls play too timidly or girls don't take enough risks. And I was like, maybe the reason why I could not stand the pressure of competition, why I get so anxious, is because I'm a girl. It's because of some innate quality of me. And in a way, the performance anxiety fed into the gender stereotypes, and vice versa, because as my performance anxiety worsened, so did my performance. And I was like, well, maybe I'm playing badly because of what everyone's saying, that I'm a girl. And then it just became this very vicious, self-perpetuating cycle that I couldn't snap out of, except to take a step back from chess. And in hindsight, I wish that I opened up to my coaches about it, because they are so experienced. I'm sure that they have also experienced performance anxiety at some point. And I had some great female coaches who might understand what I felt. And they could have been a really good support system if I had asked for that. But I didn't, which is something I regretted. But in the book, my character is able to open up, is able to find a support system. So in a way, I felt like I was kind of exploring how chess could have turned out for me if I had taken an alternate path.
Well, thank you for that. Now, we're sort of reaching towards the end of the interview. One, I sort of mentioned earlier, one of the themes of the book is, well, one of the motifs, I suppose, was bishops or knights. Our hero in the story describes himself as preferring bishops. But what about yourself, bishops or knights?
The bishop. I'm much more of like an open position player.
Okay.
And yeah, like my main character May, she does prefer bishops, which is why I thought it was funny, but also very deliberate, that the final game she plays, the final move, is all about a knight.
Excellent. And favorite opening with the white pieces?
I'm so cliche about this. It's honestly just a Rai Lopez. That's just my favorite opening.
Ah,
Like the first one I learned, and I'm such a creature of habit that I
okay.
saw no reason to deviate away from it, so I happily play it every time.
Okay. I personally, for a good part of my initial chess journey, hated playing against the Rui Lopez.
Oh,
Um,
why?
it's so good. I hate playing against the Rui Lopez with black. But then I now usually play the Yanish Gambit against the Rui Lopez. I do okay.
Interesting. Okay.
What about favorite opening with the black pieces?
Um, hmm. Trying to remember. Mm, Gosh, usually I just meet whatever pawn they push out. If they do
Mm-hmm.
d4, I respond with my d pawn. If they
Mm-hmm.
push out the e pawn, I respond with my e pawn. And
Mm-hmm.
now that I say it, I actually realize that as a white player, I don't think I've ever started with the d pawn. It was
Mm-hmm.
always e4. Yeah, I don't think I've played a single game with the d pawn. Actually, now that I think about it, that's quite a crazy idea. Yeah.
No, that's all right. I'm an E4 E5 player if possible, so I feel a sense of kinship. Well, thank you very much for the interview. It's been really great, having a chat with
Thank
you.
you.
Um, Once again, so the book that's out now, I think, in all good bookstores. I bought my copy from Amazon, but I think in the US you can get it from a range of places.
Yeah.
Uh, any final sort of comments for the audience?
No, thank you for reading my book. Thank you for sharing it with your audience. I know that mostly it's people from the chess community watching your video. So yes, keep watching Michael's videos.
Great, thanks. All right, cheers. Thanks for that.